Two powerful armies stood on opposite sides of a valley, ready for battle. The morning mist covered the hills as thousands of soldiers held their weapons tightly, their hearts beating fast like war drums. But this battle would not be won by the strength of many soldiers. Instead, it would be decided by the faith of one brave boy who would not let a giant mock his God. This is the story of David and Goliath, where the impossible became inevitable, where a shepherd's sling toppled a warrior's sword, and where a teenage boy taught the world that the size of your God matters more than the size of your giant. The year was around 1025 BC. In the valley of Elah, two armies faced each other, ready to fight. On one side were the Philistines, Israel's strongest and most feared enemies. On the other side were the soldiers of King Saul. They were God's chosen people, but in that moment, they shook with fear like sheep facing hungry wolves. For 40 days and 40 nights, something strange had been happening. Every morning and every evening, a voice thundered across the valley, filling the Israelites with fear. His name was Goliath of Gath. He was almost 10 feet tall, strong and cruel. His bronze helmet shone in the morning sun like a crown made for battle. He wore a heavy coat of armor that weighed more than most men could even carry. The tip of his spear alone was as heavy as a large stone, strong enough to cut through several men at once. For 40 days, not a single man in Israel was brave enough to face Goliath. Even King Saul, taller than any of his soldiers, stayed hidden in his tent. His strongest warriors made excuses to avoid the fight. God's own army stood by in silence, watching their shame grow day after day. But 60 miles away in Bethlehem, an old man named Jesse is about to send his youngest son on what seems like a simple errand. David, ruddy-faced, bright-eyed, the youngest of 8 brothers. While his older siblings march off to war, David tends his father's sheep in the quiet hills around Bethlehem. But don't mistake his youth for weakness. This boy has already faced death and lived to tell about it. When a lion crept into his flock under cover of darkness, David didn't run. When a bear reared up on its hind legs, claws ready to tear him apart, David didn't flinch. With nothing but his hands and his faith, he delivered the killing blow to both beasts. But because these weren't just sheep, they were God's sheep, entrusted to his care. "Take this food to your brothers," Jesse says, loading David's arms with grain and bread. "See how they're doing and bring me back news from the battle." David sets out before dawn, his heart racing, not with fear, but with anticipation. Finally, he'll see the army of God in action. Finally, he'll witness the power of the Almighty crushing Israel's enemies. But what he finds when he reaches the valley of Elah is not victory, it's shame. Once again, Goliath came out, just like he had every day. But this time, young David was there to see it. He couldn't believe his eyes as thousands of God's chosen soldiers turned and ran away in fear. David looked around and shouted, "Who is this Philistine that dares to insult the army of the living God?" His young voice broke the silence like a sharp blade. The soldiers stared at him as if he had gone crazy, but David couldn't understand why everyone was so afraid. Word soon reached King Saul that someone was willing to fight Goliath. When they brought the shepherd boy to him, Saul almost laughed. Almost. But then he looked into David's eyes, and something made him stop. Saul said to David, "You will not be able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are but a youth, and he has been a man of war from his youth." But David doesn't see it that way. He answered Saul saying, "Your servant used to keep his father's sheep, and when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it and struck it and delivered the lamb from its mouth. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." Saul looks into those young eyes and sees something he's forgotten: absolute and unshakable faith. They tried to put armor on David, but it was far too heavy, like trying to put a saddle on a gazelle. David wasn't meant to fight with man's weapons. God himself had prepared him. So David walked down into the valley with only his shepherd's staff, his sling, and 5 smooth stones he picked from a stream. The giant laughed loudly and said, "Am I a dog, that you come to me with sticks? Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." Then David spoke. His voice wasn't shaky or scared like you'd expect from a teenager. His words were strong and filled with God's power. "You come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel." Goliath charged forward, the ground shaking under his heavy steps. But David didn't run away. He ran straight toward the giant, reaching into his pouch. He pulled out one smooth stone, carefully chosen. Then he placed it in his sling, spinning it through the air once, twice, 3 times, and then David let go. The stone shot out of his sling like lightning, flying straight toward the giant. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. The giant wobbled like a tall tree ready to fall. His eyes rolled back, and his huge body began to tip forward. And then Goliath of Gath, the feared warrior of the Philistines, the giant everyone thought was unstoppable, fell face first into the dust of the valley. David didn't wait. He ran to the fallen giant, pulled out Goliath's own huge sword, and with one strong swing, cut off the head that had mocked the living God. Suddenly the silence broke. The Israelite soldiers shouted with a mighty war cry that echoed through the valley. The Philistines panicked and ran for their lives, leaving behind their camp, their weapons, everything, as they fled from the army of the God of Israel. That day in the valley of Elah, a young shepherd boy showed the world a lesson that will never be forgotten. The battle belongs to the Lord. David didn't win because he was stronger, faster, or more skilled. He won because he understood something that giants and armies and kings had forgotten, that no weapon formed against God's people can prosper, that no giant is too big for the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. What are the giants standing in your valley today? What are the voices mocking your faith, challenging your God, telling you that victory is impossible? Think about David. Think about the smooth stone he used. The same God who helped that young shepherd win is the same God helping you right now. The fight is God's, and with Him, big problems fall, victories happen, and what seems impossible becomes possible. This is the story of David and Goliath, where faith beat fear, where a young boy became a hero, and where everyone saw that what really matters isn't how big the person is in the fight, but how big God is inside that person.